for some context to the story, me and my boyfriend are both 18. We were at home all day with his dad until my boyfriend had to go to work. In this story, I'm gonna call my boyfriend's dad Alex. My boyfriend tonight was working the evening shift at his work, and he left around 7 p.m. Alex, my boyfriend's dad, also works late night shifts, so I assumed he was getting some rest until he had to leave for his job. Me not wanting to disturb Alex, I stayed in my boyfriend's room for about 2 hours, scrolling pointlessly on my phone, making as little noise as possible in case his dad was really asleep. I have ADHD, so sitting still is very challenging when in the middle of a very hyperactive episode, so I decided to get up and clean my boyfriend's room as quietly as I could, tiptoeing everywhere I stepped. The time had come where I physically could not stay in that room any longer, so I crept to the bottom floor. It's a 3-story house, let me mention, to put the rubbish I collected into the bin. I had to walk from the 3rd floor down past the 2nd where my boyfriend's parents' room is, presuming Alex was sleeping there. However, the door is wide open and the room was dark. For your information, their doors never open if they are in there. Not the weirdest thing, right? I went downstairs and threw the rubbish away. The shower comes on. That must explain it. Alex is in the shower next to his bedroom, hence the door there being open. I made myself a tea in the kitchen and heard the shower turn off. I heard him walking back to his room, opening the closet door to get his clothes and shutting the closet again. I was and still am certain that I heard the closet opening, as it has a door that rolls to the side. Unlike a normal closet door, it makes a distinct creak when opened far enough. I stayed in the kitchen for quite a long time, as I didn't want to go back upstairs and walk through the middle floor to accidentally walk into Alex getting changed or in his underwear. Since I was in the kitchen, I made myself instant noodles. It was now around 10 p.m. and about 20 minutes had passed since the wardrobe closed. Alex is always out of the shower right before he has to leave. I'm guessing he wants to maximize the time he has in bed before shift. But he hadn't come downstairs yet. I ate my noodles slowly and still no Alex, or no sign of him at least, so I decided to go back upstairs. This time when passing the middle floor, the bedroom door was only slightly ajar, with the light still off. I thought to myself that Alex must definitely still be in there. It didn't occur to me until I got back upstairs that there was no way he could have been home. All the lights were off on the middle floor, and no movement anywhere in the house. I certainly didn't pass him on my way upstairs, as there was only one staircase up, and I would have seen him come down. Just to be sure, I looked out of the window to see if his car was still in the driveway. And of course, as a cliche, there was no car in the driveway. At this time, I FaceTimed my sister, about to have a panic attack, when I heard the shower come on, again. She told me that she's hearing it too, which rules out to me being crazy. She told me that what I should do is I should call out Alex to see if he replies. As expected, I called him 2 times, and no answer the both times. I spoke to Alex the next morning, and it turns out that he left the house the same time as my boyfriend, 7 p.m., to charge the electric car before work. I have so many questions. The most frustrating part about this is neither my boyfriend nor his mom believe me. I must mention that his parents don't believe in the paranormal, so I'm guessing I just want to be heard. I also must mention that I was silent throughout my whole hyperactive episode for no reason. That was painful. Just to clarify, their house is brand new. It was built in 2019, that's how new it was. And from what I can find on the internet, the house wasn't built on any significant ground, only an ordinary patch of land. However, I've always had a creepy feeling from the bottom floor. Their bottom bathroom is very small and has 2 mirrors directly facing each other. The living room has a very eerie silence when you walk into it. It almost hurts your ears. Almost. I used to work as a lifeguard at a local indoor swimming pool when I was 16. I didn't like the job too much, mainly because it didn't get a lot of social interaction, and because the work environment was pretty toxic. Let's just say a lot of lifeguards dreaded coming to work whenever they had to. I would usually work weekdays after school from 5 to 10 p.m. Well, this experience of mine happened on either a Tuesday or a Thursday. All I remember was that it was a very stressful day at school, and that I had to deal with a stressful night at work. The manager on duty that night was a 20-year-old guy named Sean. Sean was always in a bad mood, so when he ever asked me to do something, I did it without any complaint. When we were not lifeguarding, Sean would make us go clean something usually. He only wanted us to clean something because he wanted it to make it look like us lifeguards were busy doing something instead of sitting and chilling out, on our phones usually. Well, I got off the lifeguard stand sometime in the middle of the shift, and Sean asked me if I could go downstairs to the janitor's closet and fill up the mop bucket and then mop the bleachers. I agreed to do so, and he handed me the keys to the door that led down to the janitor's closet. To get to the janitor's closet, you had to open a door that led downstairs to the pump room, and the janitor's closet was down a skinny hallway to the left of it. I unlocked the door to the pump room and walked down the half flight of stairs down to it. I walked through the skinny hallway to the janitor's closet, unlocked the door and opened it, and turned on the lights. I put the hose in the mop bucket and turned on the water. As I was filling up the mop bucket, I heard a strange noise come from the corner of the closet. I turned off the water and listened for the noise again. The noise sounded human-like. I realized that it was the sound of someone breathing. In the corner from where I was hearing the breathing, there was a laundry machine in the corner that hasn't been used in years. From where the laundry machine was, that was where I was hearing the breathing. Maybe there was something behind the laundry machine. So after moving the laundry machine, I realized from behind where the laundry machine was, there was a giant vent. I knew that's where the breathing was coming from. I knelt down to the giant vent and asked who was in there. All I got in response was breathing. It sounded like heavy breathing, the breathing of a man, not some middle-aged man, rather an elderly man. I said, excuse me? Who are you? How did you get down on those vents? And why are you down in those vents? What I got in response still gives me chills. I just heard the man say, "Go away." About a second later, I could see a knife through the blade vent. The knife was pointed at me. But the crazy thing was, I couldn't see who was holding the knife. The older man must have been holding the knife, but I couldn't see him. I tried to look closer, but I didn't get too close in fear of the man stabbing me. But as I was doing so, the older man shoved the knife through the vent blade. I said, okay, I'm leaving. I picked up the laundry machine and put it right back in the corner. I rolled the mop bucket out of the janitor's closet and shut the door and locked it. I then went back upstairs with the mop bucket. I mopped the bleachers until it was my time to go back on the lifeguard stand. I never told Sean the manager about what I experienced. A few days later, I talked to one of the managers, Nick. I was comfortable talking to Nick about everything, so I was comfortable talking to him about what I experienced. Nick also had the most experience of every other manager, so I trusted to tell him what I experienced. After telling Nick my story, he looked at me in confusion and said that there was no laundry machine down there. He told me he wouldn't tell anybody what I experienced, but that he would check down there later with a pocket knife in hand. He texted me the next day saying that there was no laundry machine and that nobody was in the vent. My experience is true, and I have no idea what happened to the man or the laundry machine, but I'm going to tell you now what I experienced is true, and it still freaks me out. About a month later, I quit the job and got another job, but I'm still terrified of that janitor's closet and that the man will find me somehow. My mom has told me a lot of creepy stories from her younger days. This one in particular is the reason. I make sure everything is locked at night before bed. This started when she was 23. She moved out of her parents' house into a garden floor apartment back in the early 80s. She grew up in Palatine, Illinois, which is a northern suburb of Chicago, and she was working as a bank teller. She was 5 feet at the time and maybe weighed 100 pounds soaking wet, but she was this cute young girl excited to start this next chapter in her life, and admittedly, a little naive. Like any job, she became familiar with her coworkers, regular customers, and other workers who worked in the area that she would see that often. She told me about a guy she liked that would walk by the bank that she saw almost every shift. Her and the other bank girls would always chatter about how gorgeous he was, and one day, to my mom's delight, he came into the bank and asked her to dinner. Let's call him Tom. Tom offers to pick her up. She gave Tom her address, and they agreed to meet at 7 p.m. that upcoming Saturday. Well, come Saturday, the date went fine. She described him as awkward and nervous with a lack of anything to talk about. He dropped her off a few hours later, told him thanks, but when he asked her out for a second date, she politely declined and said she saw him more as a friend. She went to work on Monday, gossiped with the girls a bit on the topic. They stopped seeing Tom walk by the bank, and my mom thought that would be the end of it. Sadly though, it was just the beginning. After that, they stopped seeing Tom walk by the bank. My mom forgot about him and met my dad at a local bar a few weeks later. I must mention that the bank, the bar, and the house were all in walking distance from each other. 2 months went by since her date with Tom, and one night she gets home from work to find her apartment had been broken into. The front door is wide open, but surprisingly, all that was taken was her panties. That was the only thing that was touched by the intruder. The lock on the door wasn't good, so her dad comes over the next day and puts deadbolts on the front and back door. A week goes by, and one morning she sees her upstairs neighbor Janet standing in the main hallway. Janet tells my mom that the night before, when she came home from work, she saw a man at my mom's front door messing with the door handle. Janet heard the fumbling and actually had my mom's spare key, so the only reason she even walked down the stairs to the garden area was because she thought my mom may have been locked out. That obviously wasn't the case, so she asked the man what he was doing, and he just ran up the stairs and darted out of the building. Lucky for my mom that night, she was sleeping at my dad's house. Nothing happened for another month. My mom tells me stories of how that month she always had a gut feeling someone was watching her, but never saw anything, so chalked it up to being a paranoia. But then one stormy Friday night, my mom went to bed early because she had the morning shift at the bank. Lights out by 10 p.m. and her fan on full blast, she falls asleep right away. She wakes up around 2 a.m. to the faint sound of drilling. She thought it was odd, but it only lasted a couple of minutes, so she shrugged it off, thinking maybe a neighbor was making a late night snack. She tries falling back asleep, but all of a sudden her fan turns off, and she realizes the power is out. She gets out of bed and sees that the house across the street all had their porch lights on. She realized it was only her house that had the power out. She is now getting really bad vibes and standing in her living room, where both the front and back door are. Standing in the complete dark, she hears banging coming from the shared laundry room area. Mom described being literally frozen just staring at the door when she suddenly sees the doorknob turn, and a hand come in, trying to undo the safety chain. She screams and runs out the front door, up to Janet's door, bangs on Janet's door, and Janet lets her in. At this point, my mom is hysterical, but Janet comforts her while her husband, Ray, goes to check everything out, and asks the neighbor to call the police since they also didn't have power. The police come and check the perimeter. They see nothing and say they will come back in the morning once they can see what's going on in the daylight. My mom sleeps at Janet's that night. The next morning, they come to find that someone had drilled a hole in the back door in order to bypass the deadbolt. They had cut the phone lines and power to the building. Sawdust was literally sitting in piles in the laundry room, along with 2 peepholes that see directly into her living room and bedroom. Someone had been watching her, and thought the night of the storm was the night to make his move. That is what really creeps me out. She moves back home. They have zero evidence that Tom was the one breaking into the house, until he popped up at the bank asking if my mom was around. Luckily, when Tom did this, my mom was out of town on a road trip with my dad. The only reason Tom was caught was because he asked the other bank tellers if my mom had quit and moved after the break-in. Long story short, I'm just happy that Tom never broke in the house.